There's a brutal truth that most men don't realize until it's too late. Women do not respect men who can't say no. If you constantly agree to everything, if you hesitate to set boundaries, if you let a woman's wants override your own values, you're not being kind, you're being weak. And here's the harshest part: weakness is never attractive. Whether they admit it or not, women test men all the time. They push, they challenge, they look for cracks. Why? Because deep down, they're wired to seek strength, not submission. A man who can't say no today will also be the man who can't stand firm when life gets tough. And that's the kind of man who loses all respect. Maybe you've felt this before. Maybe you've been in a situation where a woman started treating you differently, where the dynamic shifted, and suddenly you were no longer seen as a man she admired, but as a man she tolerated. And you couldn't figure out why. You thought you were doing everything right. You were nice, you were understanding, you went out of your way to please her. But instead of getting closer, she became more distant, less interested, less engaged. And then, eventually, she walked away. Sound familiar? That's because respect is built on boundaries. And when you fail to set them, you fail to establish your own value. Women respect men who respect themselves, men who have a spine, men who can stand firm even when it's uncomfortable. And the moment you start bending over backwards, agreeing to things you don't actually want, or tolerating behavior you shouldn't, you send a clear message: I don't value myself enough to say no. And if you don't value yourself, why should anyone else? But here's the real problem. Most men don't even realize they're failing this test. They think that saying yes to everything makes them more desirable, more lovable, more of a good guy. They confuse being agreeable with being strong. And yet the more they comply, the more they feel like something's missing, like they're slowly losing themselves. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever been in a relationship or situation where you knew deep down that you should have said no, but you didn't? Maybe she wanted you to change your plans at the last minute. Maybe she made an unreasonable demand, and instead of standing your ground, you just went along with it. Maybe she crossed a line, disrespected you, and instead of calling it out, you let it slide. And then what happened? Did she respect you more for it? Did she appreciate your kindness? No. She might have thanked you in the moment, but over time, something changed. The way she looked at you, the way she treated you, the way she felt about you. And that's because deep down, women don't just want a nice guy. They want a strong man, a man who knows his worth, a man who is kind, yes, but who also has a backbone. And the minute you start compromising your boundaries just to please her, you lose something crucial: her respect. Now let me make something very clear. This isn't about being rude. It's not about being difficult or dismissive. Saying no isn't about playing games or being controlling. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to compromise on your values. It's about showing through your actions that you are a man of principle. And that is what earns genuine respect. Think about the men you respect the most. Are they pushovers? Are they the type who agree to everything, who let others dictate their choices? No, they are firm, decisive. They know what they stand for, and they won't bend just to make others happy. That's what makes them leaders, and that's the exact kind of man women are wired to admire. But what happens when you fail this test? When you become the man who always says yes, you become predictable, safe, and worst of all, forgettable. A woman may enjoy the convenience of having a man who does whatever she wants, but she won't respect him. And without respect, attraction dies. This is why so many relationships fail. Not because of major betrayals or fights, but because over time, a man loses his identity. He stops standing up for himself. He stops prioritizing his own needs. He becomes someone whose only purpose is to keep her happy. And ironically, that's exactly what pushes her away. Because here's the ugly truth. When you make a woman the center of your world, she will start treating you like an accessory to hers. You become the man she settles for, not the man she desires. You become weak in her eyes, even if she doesn't say it out loud. But here's the good news: you can change this right now, and when you do, everything shifts. Women look at you differently. They feel something different when they're around you. A presence, a silent authority, an energy that says, I don't need validation, I don't need approval, I know my worth. And when you start carrying yourself like that, when you start saying no to things that don't align with your values, you will notice something incredible. Women will begin to chase you. They will test you to see if you're really that strong. And when they realize you are, their respect and admiration will skyrocket. So if you've been struggling with relationships, if you've felt like something was missing, if you've ever wondered why things fizzle out despite your best efforts, start with this. Learn to say no. Stand firm in your beliefs. Set boundaries. Respect yourself first, and respect from others will follow. And if you're serious about developing unshakable confidence, mastering your emotions, and becoming the kind of man that commands respect effortlessly, then check out my exclusive training. The link is in the description and pinned comment, but don't click it yet. Stick with me until the end of this video, because what I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes could completely change the way you see yourself, relationships, and life itself. So let's get into it. How do you actually say no and earn real respect? Women test men all the time. Some do it consciously, others don't even realize they're doing it. But make no mistake, every woman you've ever interacted with has tested you in some way. These tests come in different forms, and they're not necessarily malicious. It's not about playing games or making you jump through hoops for entertainment. It's instinctive. A woman needs to know that the man in her life is strong, emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually. She needs to feel that he's grounded, that he's not easily swayed, not easily broken, and definitely not desperate for her approval. This is where the ability to say no separates weak men from strong men. And here's the brutal truth. Most men fail these tests without even realizing it. They cave in, they accommodate, they say yes when they should say no, all because they think that being agreeable, always available, and endlessly accommodating will make them more attractive. But the opposite is true. The moment a woman realizes she can control you, she loses respect for you. It's not immediate. It's not like she wakes up one morning and suddenly stops caring. No, it happens slowly. It happens in the little moments, in the tiny decisions where you show hesitation, where you change your opinion just to please her, where you compromise your own priorities just to be more likable. At first, she may not even notice it herself, but over time, she feels it. The respect starts to fade, the attraction starts to dwindle, and before you know it, she's pulling away, treating you differently, and you're left confused, wondering what you did wrong. The mistake wasn't something big. It wasn't a grand failure or some catastrophic event. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Every time you let something slide, every time you compromised your boundaries, every time you prioritized her approval over your own principles, you were sending one clear message: I need you more than I need to be myself. And that is the ultimate attraction killer. Think about it. Have you ever been in a situation where everything started great? Where a woman was highly interested, drawn to you, engaging with enthusiasm, but as time went on, she seemed to lose that spark? Maybe she started responding to your texts differently. Maybe she began to flake on plans more often. Maybe she started taking longer to reply, showing less enthusiasm, seeming distant for no clear reason. And you didn't understand why. You thought you were doing everything right. You were attentive, you were giving, you were saying all the right things, making all the right moves. But here's the thing, saying the right things means nothing if your actions show weakness. If a woman senses that she can manipulate your decisions, that she can bend you to her will, she will subconsciously start to test the limits of your resolve. She might start with small things, asking you to cancel your plans for her, seeing how much she can dictate your time. If you comply easily, if you immediately adjust everything to fit her needs, it might seem like a sweet, romantic gesture to you, but to her, it's an unspoken signal of weakness. And weakness is the fastest way to kill attraction. Because here's what most men don't realize. Women don't want a man who bends over backward for them. They want a man who knows his worth and isn't afraid to stand by it. Let me give you an example. A guy named Jake once told me about a woman he was seeing. In the beginning, she was obsessed with him. She admired him. She respected him. She treated him like a priority. But slowly, things changed. She started testing him in subtle ways. She would challenge his decisions, dismiss his opinions, make unreasonable demands. And instead of standing firm, instead of saying no when necessary, Jake did what most men do. He tried to be agreeable. He thought that if he showed understanding, if he compromised, if he adjusted to her moods, she would appreciate him more. But what happened? The opposite. The more he gave in, the more distant she became. The more he tried to please her, the less she respected him. And one day, out of nowhere, she ended things. She told him she just didn't feel it anymore, that she needed space, that something was missing. But what was missing? His strength, his ability to say no, his ability to hold his ground, to be the man she was initially drawn to. And this is the pattern that plays out over and over again. Women aren't testing you because they enjoy watching you fail. They're testing you because they need to know you won't fold under pressure. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes incredibly powerful. The great Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, understood that the most important battle a man faces is the battle within himself. They taught that true strength isn't about physical dominance, but about mental discipline, emotional control, and the ability to stand firm in the face of external pressure. The moment you allow yourself to be swayed by another person's approval or disapproval, you lose your power. And in relationships, power doesn't mean control, it means self-respect. Because when you have unshakable self-respect, women feel it, they respect it, and respect is the foundation of attraction. The ability to say no isn't about being difficult. It's about having standards. It's about being a man who won't compromise his values for temporary validation. A man who won't tolerate disrespect, who won't alter his path just to fit into someone else's expectations. A man who stands tall, not because he's trying to impress anyone, but because he knows that his worth isn't negotiable. Women will always test men. It's in their nature. But when you pass those tests, when you remain unshaken, when you calmly and confidently say no when needed, something powerful happens. The respect deepens, the attraction intensifies, and most importantly, you become the kind of man who commands respect, not just from women, but from the world. If you're tired of feeling like you have to prove yourself, if you're done chasing approval, if you're ready to be the man who sets the standard instead of adjusting to others' expectations, then start today. Start by paying attention to the small moments where you hesitate, where you compromise, where you say yes when you should say no. Correct those moments, and everything else changes. This isn't about playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about rediscovering your strength and refusing to let go of it. And before we move on, let me ask you, how many times have you given up your power without realizing it? How many times have you said yes just to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to make someone like you more? It's time to change that, because once you master the ability to say no, you master the ability to command respect in every area of your life. And in the next part, we're going even deeper into this, because what comes next is even more important. Now that you understand the power of saying no and how it impacts respect and attraction, let's go even deeper into this concept. Because the truth is, this skill isn't just about relationships with women, it shapes your entire life. If you don't master this ability, you will constantly be manipulated, used, and placed in positions where you lose your own value. And the worst part, it happens silently. Many men go years, even decades, without realizing that they are sacrificing their own identity just to fit in, to avoid conflict, to please others. But when they finally wake up, they look back and ask themselves, how did I let this happen? If you want to avoid that fate, pay attention now. Imagine a simple scenario. A man is dating a woman who constantly pushes his limits. She tests him by demanding things he's uncomfortable with, making fun of his beliefs, or subtly disrespecting him in front of others. He notices it, he feels the discomfort, but instead of addressing it, he lets it slide. Maybe because he doesn't want to create tension. Maybe because he fears that standing his ground will push her away, and so he compromises. One small compromise leads to another. Over time, he becomes someone he no longer recognizes, a shadow of the strong, confident man he once was. This is how men lose themselves in relationships. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens through 1,000 tiny concessions, each one chipping away at their self-respect. And when they finally realize it, it's too late. The woman has lost all attraction for him because deep down she doesn't respect him anymore. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because he failed. One critical test, the test of self-respect. Women, whether consciously or unconsciously, test men all the time. Not because they are cruel, but because they are wired to seek strength, to look for a man who won't break under pressure. And the simplest way to fail these tests? By always saying yes. Think about it. The man who agrees to everything is a man who stands for nothing. A woman might initially enjoy the attention, the willingness, the eagerness, but over time she starts to resent it. Why? Because she doesn't want a servant. She wants a leader, a man who knows what he stands for, a man who has boundaries, a man who is willing to walk away rather than betray his own values. That is what creates real attraction. That is what separates a man who is merely tolerated from a man who is deeply respected. And it's not just women. The world itself respects men who can say no. If you accept every request, agree to every demand, bend to every pressure, you will never build anything of value. You will be too busy serving others' interests while your own life remains stagnant. Saying no isn't just about relationships. It's about building a life that reflects your purpose, your vision, your standards. Look at the great Stoic philosophers. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, was surrounded by people who tried to influence his decisions, pressure him, manipulate him. But his strength came from his discipline, his ability to say no to distractions, indulgence, and weakness, his ability to stand firm in his values. And what about Epictetus, the former slave who became one of the greatest Stoic teachers? He had no wealth, no status, no power, yet his unshakable character made men follow him. Because he understood one thing: the man who controls himself controls the world. This is the lesson. A man who lacks discipline, who says yes out of fear, who compromises because he's afraid to lose, is a man who will always be controlled. But a man who has the courage to say no when it matters, that man is unstoppable. And if you're watching this, it means you're someone who wants to be that kind of man. You're someone who's ready to take control, to stop bending to pressure, to stop seeking approval, and to start living on your own terms. But let me tell you this, the most dangerous test is yet to come. What happens when a woman realizes you are different? When she sees that you won't break under pressure, that's when she will test you even harder. That's what we're going to uncover next. How to handle the ultimate test. And trust me, if you fail this one, everything we've talked about so far won't matter. So stay with me. Because what comes next is the defining moment between men who command respect and those who get walked over. The answer to the question of female respect often doesn't lie in sweet words or empty promises, but in a man's ability to set clear and non-negotiable boundaries. Modern society pushes the idea that men should always please, yield, and avoid conflict to keep a woman interested. But Stoic teachings show the exact opposite. A man who doesn't know how to say no inevitably becomes weak in a woman's eyes. Imagine a man who, at every request or demand from a woman, immediately complies, without question. Whether she asks him to cancel his plans to be available for her, to change his values to align with hers, or to tolerate behavior that he finds unacceptable, he always says yes out of fear of losing her. What does this communicate? That his time, his beliefs, and his self-respect are secondary to her validation. And once a woman senses that a man is willing to sacrifice his integrity for her approval, her respect for him erodes. Women subconsciously test men all the time, not out of malice, but as a way to determine whether he is truly confident in himself. A man who stands firm in his values, who knows when to say no without hesitation, is the kind of man who commands respect. This isn't about being unnecessarily stubborn or refusing compromise. It's about ensuring that his decisions come from a place of self-respect, not desperation. Stoicism teaches that the only thing within our control is our own behavior. The external world, whether it be circumstances, people, or women, is beyond our control. This means that a man should not allow external pressures to dictate his decisions. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." A man who constantly bends his will to accommodate someone else's desires is not living by his own values. He is being controlled. Now let's apply this concept to a real-life scenario. Picture two men dating the same woman. The first man agrees. Do everything she says. If she cancels plans last minute, he says, "No problem." If she flirts with other men in front of him, he brushes it off to avoid confrontation. If she demands that he change aspects of himself that he values, he complies to keep her happy. The second man, however, operates differently. If she cancels plans at the last minute without a valid reason, he makes it clear that his time is valuable and won't be wasted. If she tests his boundaries with disrespect, he calmly but firmly lets her know that such behavior isn't acceptable. If she tries to manipulate him emotionally, he doesn't react out of insecurity. He remains grounded in his own principles. Which of these two men do you think she will respect more? The answer is obvious. The man who prioritizes himself, who values his time and self-worth, will always be the one who earns long-term respect. Women may initially enjoy the attention of a man who bends over backward for them, but over time, that same man becomes unattractive because he lacks a backbone. Crucial part of being a man who can say no is understanding the power of indifference. Stoicism teaches that we should not be emotionally dependent on outcomes. This applies to relationships just as much as it does to life's broader challenges. A man who is terrified of losing a woman will tolerate disrespect, compromise his values, and weaken himself to keep her around. But a man who understands that his happiness and fulfillment do not depend on any one person becomes incredibly powerful. Consider this: a woman might test a man by making unreasonable demands just to see how he reacts. If he immediately agrees, she subconsciously registers that he is easily controlled. But if he calmly refuses, without anger, without insecurity, but with absolute certainty in himself, she realizes that he is not like the others. He is someone who knows his worth. This is where many men fail. They think that by always being agreeable, by always accommodating, they are proving their value. But in reality, they are doing the opposite. They are showing that they are willing to sacrifice their own needs, their own ambitions, their own self-respect, all for the approval of someone else. Epictetus, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once said, "It is not things themselves that disturb people, but their judgments about those things." In other words, it is not the woman's behavior that should dictate a man's reaction, but rather his own internal framework of values. If a man is strong in his beliefs, if he knows exactly what he stands for, then external factors, whether it's a woman's opinion, societal expectations, or peer pressure, cannot shake him. This is why a Stoic man remains unmoved by emotional manipulation. If a woman tries to guilt-trip him, he sees it for what it is, an attempt to control his emotions. If she tries to provoke a reaction, he understands that reacting emotionally gives away his power. Instead, he remains calm, rational, and in control, and that is incredibly attractive. One of the key reasons why saying no is so powerful is because it forces others to respect your boundaries. When you communicate through your actions that your standards are non-negotiable, people, women included, will recognize that you are not someone to be taken lightly. They will understand that you are a man of discipline, a man of strength, a man who operates based on principle, not desperation. Let's take an example from ancient Stoicism. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, despite having immense power, was known for his ability to remain composed under pressure. He never allowed external events, whether it was betrayal, war, or political manipulation, to dictate his actions. Instead, he adhered to his values, making decisions based on reason rather than fear. A modern Stoic man should apply this same principle to relationships. If a woman respects him, it should be because of his character, not because he conforms to whatever she wants. But how does a man start implementing this in his life? It begins with self-awareness. Pay attention to how you respond in interactions. Are you saying yes because you genuinely agree, or because you're afraid of the consequences of saying no? Are you compromising your values to avoid conflict, or because you truly believe it's the right thing to do? The more a man understands his motivations, the more control he has over his decisions. And here's something crucial. Learning to say no is not about becoming cold or emotionally unavailable. It's about maintaining a strong sense of self. Women don't lose interest in men who are kind or considerate. They lose interest in men who lack conviction. A Stoic man can be both kind and firm, empathetic, yet unwavering in his principles. So, as you go forward, ask yourself, what are the areas in my life where I've been too accommodating? Where have I compromised my standards out of fear rather than choice? The moment you start standing your ground calmly, rationally, but firmly, you will notice a shift, not just in how women perceive you, but in how you perceive yourself. This is not about playing games or trying to manipulate attraction. It's about developing unshakable confidence built on the foundation of self-respect. Because at the end of the day, a man who respects himself first is the one who naturally commands the respect of others. If this is resonating with you so far, stay with me, because in the next section, we'll explore how to reinforce these principles in everyday life and ensure that you never fall into the trap of losing yourself just to keep someone else. One of the most fundamental truths that every Stoic man must understand is this: saying no isn't just about rejecting requests, it's about defining your identity. Every time you refuse to compromise your values, you are reinforcing your self-respect. Every time you allow yourself to be manipulated, you are eroding it. Women, like all people, are naturally drawn to strength, and there is no greater display of strength than a man who stands firmly on his principles. But here's where most men go wrong. They believe that saying no will make them unlikable or unattractive. They fear rejection, believing that setting boundaries will push people away. But the truth is the exact opposite. When you set clear boundaries, you don't repel people. You command respect. A man without boundaries is like a house with no doors. Anyone can walk in, take what they want, and leave whenever they please. A man with firm boundaries, however, becomes someone of value, someone who others, including women, recognize as a person worth respecting. Now, let's take a moment to analyze one of the most overlooked aspects of relationships: tests. Women will test you, whether consciously or unconsciously, to determine if you truly are the man you claim to be. These tests aren't meant to be cruel. They're meant to reveal your character. A woman might challenge your decisions, push against your boundaries, or even try to provoke an emotional reaction. How you respond in these moments determines whether she sees you as a strong, respectable man or just another weak-willed follower. For example, a woman might ask you to do something that goes against your principles, perhaps skipping an important responsibility just to be with her, lending her money early in a relationship, or tolerating disrespectful behavior in the name of keeping the peace. If you give in to these demands, even once, she registers that you are willing to trade your self-respect for her approval. And once a woman loses respect for you, attraction fades, often without you even realizing it. This is where Stoicism comes into play. A Stoic man is never reactive. He remains calm, centered, and unwavering. When tested, he doesn't lash out emotionally or over-explain himself. He simply upholds his boundaries with quiet confidence. If a woman tries to make him feel guilty for saying no, he doesn't fall into the trap of explaining or justifying his decisions. He knows that his self-worth isn't up for negotiation. Take, for instance, a man who is working on an important business project. He has deadlines to meet and goals to accomplish. Suddenly, the woman he's dating insists that he cancel everything to spend time with her. A weak man, afraid of upsetting her, will cave in. He will abandon his priorities just to avoid conflict. But a strong man, a Stoic man, will say, "I would love to see you, but I have responsibilities that I cannot ignore." He doesn't apologize. He doesn't beg for her understanding. He simply stands by his values. What happens next? The weak man earns temporary approval, but in the long run, she will see him as someone who lacks purpose and drive. The strong man, however, might initially face resistance, but deep down, she will respect him more. Because respect is not given, it is earned through consistency. This principle applies beyond just relationships with women. It extends to friendships, business partnerships, and everyday interactions. A man who can't say no in his personal life will struggle to say no in his professional life. He will take on extra work he doesn't want, tolerate mistreatment from peers, and fail to stand up for himself when it matters most. And here's the ultimate truth. If you can't respect yourself, no one else will either. So how does a man develop this level of confidence? It starts with self-awareness. Pay close attention to the moments when you feel pressured to say yes, when you really want to say no. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it aligns with my values, or am I doing it out of fear? Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being alone. A man who makes decisions based on fear is not truly free. A Stoic man, however, operates from a place of internal strength. And let's be clear, learning to say no isn't about being rude or dismissive. It's about being firm yet respectful. A man who respects himself doesn't need to raise his voice, argue, or prove his point aggressively. He simply knows his worth and acts accordingly. His silence, his calm demeanor, his unwavering stance, these are the things that make people respect him, including women. This is why Stoic men never feel the need to chase validation. They understand that their value isn't determined by how much others approve of them. They don't beg for attention. They don't compromise their standards just to be liked, and they certainly don't tolerate disrespect. They walk through life with quiet confidence, knowing that the right people will naturally gravitate toward them. Now, think about the men you admire. Whether it's historical figures, great leaders, or personal mentors, what do they all have in common? A strong sense of self. They don't let the opinions of others dictate their decisions. They don't fear saying no, and as a result, they command respect without even trying. Let's return to the relationship dynamic. Many men believe that being too accommodating, too agreeable, and too self-sacrificing will make them more attractive. But as we've seen, this only leads to a loss of respect. The key is balance. Yes, be kind. Yes, be considerate, but never at the expense of your self-respect. The reality is, women don't want men who can be controlled. They want men who stand firm in their beliefs, who have a direction in life, and who don't compromise their values just to gain approval. A woman may test you, she may challenge you, but if you hold your ground with calm certainty, she will respect you, even if she doesn't always like it in the moment. So, how can you start applying this in your daily life? First, practice small acts of saying no. If you're asked to do something you don't want to do, politely decline. If someone tries to manipulate you emotionally, recognize it and refuse to engage. If a woman pushes your boundaries, calmly but firmly reinforce them. Each time you do this, you strengthen your internal framework of self-respect. Second, pay attention to how people react. Notice that those who truly respect you will not resent your boundaries. They will admire them. The ones who get angry or try to push you further are the ones who are only benefiting from your lack of self-respect in the first place. Finally, internalize this fundamental truth. A man who cannot say no is a man who cannot be trusted. Because if you can't stand firm in your own values, how can anyone else believe in you? A man who is afraid to say no will always be at the mercy of others. But a man who is willing to say no when necessary is a man who is in control of his life. This is the mindset of a true Stoic man. This is the foundation of respect, not just from women, but from everyone around you. It's time to stop fearing rejection, stop seeking approval, and start living by your own principles. The moment you do, everything changes. And now, as we move into the final section, we will take all of these lessons and tie them together in a powerful conclusion. Because understanding this philosophy is just the beginning. What really matters is how you apply it in your everyday life. Stay with me, because this last part is what truly transforms a man from average to exceptional. At this point, you now understand one of the most critical lessons a man can learn: the power of saying no. This isn't just about rejecting things you don't like. It's about defining who you are, protecting your values, and commanding respect. The way a man upholds his boundaries is a direct reflection of his self-worth. If you can't say no, if you're constantly bending to the will of others, if you're afraid of upsetting people, then you're handing over control of your life. And the harsh truth is, no one respects a man who cannot stand up for himself. But let's be clear, this journey isn't easy. Society conditions men to be agreeable, to prioritize making others happy, to avoid confrontation. You've been told that being nice is the key to success with women and in life. But in reality, being too nice at the cost of your own integrity only leads to disappointment, frustration, and a lack of respect. Women don't admire men who grovel for approval. They respect men who know their worth and refuse to compromise. Think about it. When have you ever truly respected someone who lets others walk all over them? You don't, and neither do women. So now comes the real question. What are you going to do with this knowledge? You've absorbed these principles, but wisdom without action is useless. Right now, you're standing at a crossroads. You can either return to old habits, seeking validation, fearing rejection, allowing people to dictate your choices, or you can make a decision to change. And change starts with action. Starting today, become hyper-aware of how often you compromise your own needs to avoid discomfort. Do you say yes when you really mean no? Do you tolerate behavior that you find unacceptable just to keep the peace? Do you hesitate to assert yourself because you're afraid of pushing people away? Catch yourself in these moments. The first step toward change is recognition. When you see yourself falling into these traps, stop. Take a breath. Ask yourself, am I acting out of fear or strength? You don't have to wake up tomorrow and be a completely different man. Change happens gradually through small but deliberate actions. Start setting minor boundaries. When someone asks you for a favor that you genuinely don't want to do, say no. When a woman tests your patience by disrespecting your time or effort, call it out. When someone pressures you to agree with them just to fit in, stand your ground. At first, it will feel uncomfortable. Your instinct will be to apologize, to soften the blow, to second-guess yourself. Resist that urge. Hold firm. Because every time you assert yourself, you reinforce your confidence. When you start asserting boundaries, you'll notice two types of reactions. Some people will respect you more. These are the ones who recognize strength when they see it. Women who were used to testing you and getting their way will suddenly start looking at you differently. They'll feel a newfound respect for you because they see you as a man of principle, not someone easily swayed by emotions. Friends, family, and colleagues will also take you more seriously, understanding that your words carry weight. But others will resist. These are the ones who benefited from your lack of self-respect. They'll push back, test you further, or even try to manipulate you into returning to old habits. They might guilt-trip you, make passive-aggressive comments, or accuse you of being difficult or selfish. This is where many men break, but this is also your greatest test. Stand firm, because the moment you pass this test, your self-respect solidifies. By this point, you'll start to notice a transformation. Your mindset will shift. You'll walk with a different energy, one that doesn't seek validation, but instead commands respect. This is what separates ordinary men from powerful men. A man with an unshakable frame doesn't react emotionally to small challenges. He doesn't explain himself to those who aren't worthy of an explanation. He doesn't compromise his beliefs just to be liked. Instead, he sets the standard for how he wants to be treated. And here's something crucial. The most successful, attractive and respected men in history, leaders, warriors, thinkers, innovators, all mastered this art. They understood that saying no wasn't just about denying requests. It was about defining their legacy. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers and emperors, ruled not by being agreeable, but by being firm in his convictions. He didn't let fear dictate his actions. He understood that true power comes from within. That same power is within you. When you fully embrace this mindset, your entire life changes. Women respect you more. They see you as a man of purpose and direction, not someone who bends to their every whim. People treat you differently. When you speak, they listen. When you set boundaries, they obey. You feel a deep sense of self-respect. You no longer seek external validation. You create your own. You become immune to manipulation. No one can guilt-trip you, emotionally blackmail you, or pressure you into acting against your will. This is what it means to be a Stoic man. Right now, you have two choices. You can continue living the way you've always lived, compromising your values, seeking approval, fearing rejection, or you can take control. You can start applying what you've learned here and begin the transformation into the kind of man who dictates his own path. The choice is yours. But before you go, let me ask you something. Are you ready to take this journey seriously? If so, there's one more thing you need to do. I've put together an exclusive training that dives even deeper into these principles, giving you step-by-step guidance on how to master your mindset, eliminate self-doubt, and become the kind of man who naturally commands respect. The link is in the description or the first pinned comment. If you're serious about this, click the link now and start leveling up your life. And if this message resonated with you, do this right now. Hit like so this video reaches more men who need it. Subscribe so you never miss a powerful lesson like this. Drop a comment below. Tell me which part of this hit you the hardest. Which behavior do you know you need to change? Let's build a community of strong men together. And most importantly, share this video with a friend who needs to hear it. Sometimes all it takes is one message to wake a man up. Be the person who gives that message. You've made it to the end, which means you're not just an average guy. You're someone looking to grow, to become better, to reach a higher level of self-mastery. Keep going, keep growing. The journey doesn't stop here. Now go watch another video on this channel, and let's keep leveling up together. See you in the next one.